Good morning, Newport Harbor High School students. I'm Sergeant Brian Gunsley with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and I'm talking to you live from your studio here on campus. I'm here to talk to you about fentanyl. Fentanyl is a street drug now that is being sold in large quantities, often to teenagers who are maybe unsuspectingly taking this drug, not realizing that they're taking it, thinking that they're taking something else. That looks like a medication. And so I want to talk about this so that make sure that you can make good choices and you can also steer clear of fentanyl so that you don't become an accidental victim of it. So the fentanyl we're talking about is illicit fentanyl. Illicit fentanyl is something that's made mostly by illegal drug manufacturers, not by our pharmaceutical companies, and they're shipping it to us. It's made by the cartels, essentially south of our border. They ship it over to us. They've been in business for decades, and they've been feeding kind of the demand for drugs here in the United States for a long time. And what they did is they switched over to fentanyl and they started feeding that to us. And so this is something that now is kind of widely available in the community, and you really need to know about it to stay clear of it. So we'll talk about it. What is fentanyl? Fentanyl is a highly addictive and deadly opioid analgesic. What does that mean? It's synthetic, was one thing. Synthetic means that it can be made in unlimited quantities by these cartels. They just get the precursor chemicals in their laboratories. They can combine it if they know what they're doing, and they can make unlimited amounts. Unlike other type of opioids that exist out there like morphine or heroin, those have to be made by the poppy plant. The poppy plant has growing seasons, has to be harvested and packaged and then shipped to us. It's very expensive. Fentanyl, it can be made easily in a laboratory, and it can be made in unlimited quantities, and that means that it's made cheaply, and that's why the cartels have switched over to it, because it's very powerful and it can be made and shipped to us very easily. And so one thing that we have to understand is that this is an opioid analgesic. Opioid is the type of class that it is, and then analgesic means that it's a painkiller. So it manages your pain, and it can, we're trying to get this working right. I'll stand by for a second.
We're on slide 2, right?
Yes, we're on slide 2. Okay, we're back to it. And it's advanced. Okay, now I got it. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so it is sold illegally on our streets for people to get high. It's 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin. It's sold often as a counterfeit pill. Now you have to think about this. Look at these counterfeit pills on the right-hand side. That there's one that's a Xanax on the top. Xanax is an anti-anxiety drug that people can get prescribed to them. This drug, the fentanyl, is being made to look like a Xanax pill. Xanax is a prescription, which means that you get it from a doctor. You have to go to a pharmacy, and that's how you know it's legitimate. But when someone buys it online, then what happens is that Xanax that they're getting is not going to be a legitimate Xanax. It is going to be a fentanyl pill. It's going to have a similar reaction in the body because it's going to suppress the respiratory system. It's going to kind of deal with pain and maybe relax somebody. So it seems like you're getting a Xanax, but you're not. This is a prescription drug, and it really needs to be coming from a doctor. The other drug is the oxycodone. The next one there is the M30s. It's a blue pill. That's often what we see on the streets, is it coming into this M30, or blues is what they sometimes call it. It could also be a Percocet, or it could be sold as a powder. It's often added to other street drugs such as cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine, all those other drugs that are out there. It can be found in it. It can actually be found in vape pens. It can be found in marijuana samples that we've had, our crime lab has tested. We found it in marijuana as well. So just something that's really out there in a lot of different ways. Fentanyl is a powerful drug that shuts down your breathing. And so that's really the biggest concern here, is that when someone takes too much of it, it suppresses their breathing and it causes unconsciousness. and then that's it. Once your breathing stops, it takes about 5 to 8 minutes before your heart's going to stop, and then that's going to be it. You're dead after that. So it doesn't take very long for this thing, for this medicine or this drug to kill you. So can I ask you, the one that's showing here is not the presenter's view?
Just go ahead and say next line. We'll take it over from there.
Okay.
Yeah, is that right?
Well, it's showing the not the right view. If you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the arrow over on the button. I think that's what.
Sorry, technical moment. We'll just want to make sure that we get this presentation done for you well, delivered well. Okay, that's the view I need.
And hit it.
Now it's going into.
Thank you.
Sure. For some reason, it keeps switching over to a different view.
Yeah, when we get to that part, it just stops.
Well, there's two different views, which is one is the presenter view, and it's showing the. So I sit on what's called the Child Death Review Team for the Orange County Coroner's Office. And what we do in the Orange County Coroner's Office on this Child Death Review Team is we review all cases where somebody under the age of 18 has passed away in the last quarter. And what we're trying to do is find out if there's trends or if there's some way that we could have prevented, we can prevent a future death. And so when we review these cases, we see over and over again fentanyl-related deaths, especially in the teenage years. So this is something that's really affecting young people your age, and this is why we have to be here to really discuss it and talk about how dangerous it is. If we can get the presentation to work. So one thing that we're seeing the uptick from about 2014 to 2021, which is the most recent stats that I have, we saw it have a huge increase to 691 people dying in 2021. That's in general in Orange County. So that's a lot of people dying. It's equal to 6 Southwest airline jets going down. So, you know, we have to be concerned because this is on the rise. This is something that was not getting better anytime soon. And so everybody needs to be more aware of the dangers of fentanyl. We're seeing that it's now the #1 killer of teenagers in Orange County. And just 4 years ago, we had 0 teenagers dying from this, and now we had 19 in 2021. 2022 stats are just not out yet because we're still waiting on toxicology results to come back. So when they do, then I'll update those stats, but it's going to be probably higher than the previous year if it continues with the trend. We have Alexander Neville. There's a shot of a young boy there who's 14 years old. Alexander, he lived in Aliso Viejo. He had went to a Laguna Niguel school. A nice neighborhood, kind of similar to what you see here. And he had a mom and dad at home, had a sister at home, family, all that stuff. And lived in a nice neighborhood. It wasn't anything that you would say, hey, there's red flags here. This kid is out using drugs, selling drugs, doing risky behavior or anything. He was just kind of an ordinary kid. he had friends that were starting to use marijuana, and so they were using vape pens and they were smoking some marijuana. And so Alexander surrounded himself with other kids who were using. This is according to his mom, Amy. And with that, surrounding yourself with your friends, what that does is increase your risk that maybe more or different types of drugs are going to be introduced to that friend group. And so Alexander, at the age of 14, he started using pills. Some friends introduced that. His mom thinks that maybe he had an anxiety disorder that he was trying to self-medicate for. And so he was kind of playing around with these different types of pills to maybe get some relief for that anxiety disorder. So Alexander, at one point, had sat down his mom and dad and said, "Hey, I've got a problem, and it's not the marijuana. It's actually, the problem is with these pills that I've been taking." Amy and Alexander's dad did not know he had switched over to pills, but Alexander said, "I think I'm hooked on them, and I think I need some help for it," which means he got addicted. So because fentanyl is so powerful, it really increases the addiction possibility. So increased potency means increased chance that someone will become addicted. So now he has a hijacked brain at the age of 14. And Alexander asked for help. His mom made a phone call to an addiction specialist, set up an appointment for the next day, and they were like, "We're going to get this under control." What happened that night is Alexander, with an addicted mind, thinking that, you know what, this is the last time that I'm going to get high. He went out and he got high. He met somebody who, on Snapchat, probably someone who was maybe supplying him with pills on a regular basis, literally delivered the pill to his house. He took that pill and passed away that night. His mom remembers going down to wake him up. She went to knock on the door. She just felt like something was different. Pushed open the door, saw him sitting on his beanbag chair, lifeless, as if he had just fallen asleep. This is where he often sat to play a video game or read a book. Alexander had passed away. He had been down too long, and there was no way to recover him. His toxicology results, when the coroner tested his blood to see how much of fentanyl was in his system, what they did was they found that there was enough fentanyl in the system to kill him twice. So the pill that he got, being that it was a counterfeit pill, it had enough in it to kill Alexander twice. You can go to the next slide. So this is a short video that will kind of tell you why it's so potent, why this drug can be so potent, and the small amount that you need in order for it to kill you.
Unresponsive at this time. ETA about 2 minutes. Anything further?
My name is Dominic Tierno. Since I graduated high school in 2014, I've had the great honor of directing a number of documentary films about drugs and drug addiction. Our mission is to revolutionize drug education by telling real-life stories that motivate young people to make one of the most important decisions of their life, and that's the decision to not use drugs. 2020 was the worst year for drug overdose deaths that we have ever seen. In the beginning of summer in 2020, I came across this article. A 14-year-old kid from a town I grew up in had died from what appeared to be a drug overdose. He's a smart, funny guy who, like many kids, was struggling with some anxiety issues and decided that he would turn to drugs to see if he could help himself with that. What happened was he went and bought this pill, this Oxycontin pill, from a guy he had known because he thought that pill might ease the pain of what he was going through mentally. Well, he didn't know it, but that Oxycontin pill wasn't a real Oxycontin pill. It was a fake pill. It looked just like the pill that he wanted to try, but instead of Oxycontin, it was made with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid known to be 50 to 100 times the strength of morphine. That one pill he took that night killed him almost instantly, and his mom found him dead in his bedroom the next morning. Before I can even finish that article, I'm scrolling through and I see another linked article. Not far away, around the same time, another 14-year-old dead from fentanyl. So then I go back to Google and I type in fentanyl deaths. I hit search, and then it all made sense. I saw another kid, and I saw high school students, college students, young adults, all recent, all over the country, all dead from fentanyl. And so I'm looking at that and I'm saying, these aren't just normal overdose deaths. These people think they're taking one drug and turns out they're being killed. Why have we not heard about this?
It's a drug 50 times more potent than heroin, and doctors say just touching it can send you to the emergency room. We're talking about the synthetic opioid fentanyl.
This would be how much cocaine somebody would have to ingest to kill them. This is the approximate number of prescription pills one would have to ingest to kill them. This is the amount of heroin the average person would have to ingest to kill them. Fentanyl. You're gonna have to bring that camera up here real close to see it. This much fentanyl would kill you and I if we split it. They put fentanyl in cocaine. They put fentanyl in heroin. They put fentanyl, as we already know and talked about, into counterfeit pills. It's odorless, it's tasteless, you don't know it's there. And when you find out it's there, it's too late. You won't even know it. You'll be dead. 2,500 people would be killed by that amount of fentanyl.
Unresponsive at this time.
2,500 people would be killed by that amount of fentanyl.
Okay, so you can see from that there's, you don't need very much of it. It's just a tiny, tiny little amount that is needed to kill you, compared to other drugs that are out there that have also been very deadly in our community. So Trinity Cornejo, she was a 17-year-old student who went to Troy High School, which is a school in Fullerton. She, you have to apply to this school to get there. You have to be very kind of academically inclined, you have to be very smart. She played sports, she was your typical teenager. And she went to a gathering, and at that gathering, this is according to her mom, she got what was probably a fentanyl pill. Don't know why she ended up with this fentanyl pill. Maybe she thought it was a different type of pill. She thought it was a Xanax. She thought it was an oxycodone, something else, but she ended up with a fentanyl pill. When she came home, her mom said that she was on the nod. On the nod means that you are kind of falling asleep, and then you wake up, and then you fall asleep, and you wake up, and you kind of keep doing that. And so what happened was she came home from this gathering, she brushed her teeth and removed her makeup and went to bed and then passed away that night. What that tells me is that she likely took something at that party, it was absorbing into her system, and then it completely absorbed when she had gone to bed, and it passed, and she got too much of it, and it stopped her breathing, made her go unconscious, and she died. So if you or somebody that you're with at a party or a friend, and you end up, somebody takes one of these pills thinking that it's something else, and you end up kind of getting on the nod, where you're starting to fall asleep, and that's a medical emergency. You don't know how much was in that pill, and you need to get to the emergency room as soon as possible. I would recommend just calling 911 and saying, I took something and I don't know what's in it, but I'm now kind of feeling like I'm on the nod. And so that will help them understand that they need to monitor you and get you to the hospital as soon as possible. This is nothing to mess around with. Next slide. Again, this is another picture of how deadly this is. If this was powdered fentanyl, you can see that next to a penny, that's the small amount that you need to kill you. The other thing is just on the tip of a pencil. Tiny, tiny amount is all you need to kill you, 2 milligrams. Now that's usually by size. So people vary in their size. So teens tend to be a little smaller than, let's say, my size as a full-grown adult. And so you may need less than 2 milligrams. That's enough to kill me, not necessarily to kill you. So this stuff is extremely dangerous, very poisonous. Next slide. So this is how this is made. This is how these cartels are making it. What they do is they take a binding agent, such as microcrystalline cellulose, and then they add fentanyl to it, which is the active ingredient, and then they put it into a pill press and they crank out these pills. And you can see like that blue pill on the right, that's a very popular shape and size and look that they have of the pills that are hitting our streets. It's actually an oxycodone pill is what it looks like. It's not an oxycodone pill. These things are completely counterfeit. And so the cartels have billions of dollars at their disposal, and because they're not just feeding America these drugs, they're feeding the world with their drugs. So they're meeting the demand of the world, and so they have lots and lots of money available to them, and so they get these sophisticated pill presses that crank out thousands and thousands of pills a minute, and so lots of this hits our streets. Next slide. And so when there's that big demand for these pills, they're trying to find a lot of people, manufacturers within the country, in Mexico, to make this mixture. And so what they'll do is they'll even go as far as hiring farmers. Farmers oftentimes are starving or struggling to feed their families because they have growing seasons and maybe it's not a growing season. And so they're willing to do side work in order to make money. And here's where a cartel would come in, provide kind of the recipe, and then pay them to do this. Now it's a risk to these farmers because they often die because they breathe this in, and it can cause death pretty quickly. So these farmers have to stay upwind here. They're mixing this together just in a bucket in a field, essentially. That mixture will then be taken to a pill press, and then they'll crank out these pills and ship it to us. So there's no real scientific laboratory that this stuff is being made in. You just don't know what you're getting. Next slide. So this is what you end up with. If we could just click through this animation. So here we have a cookie dough analogy. So if you think of the cookie dough represents the binding agent, and that just causes the pill to stick together. And then you've got the chocolate chips that's added to it, and that represents the fentanyl. You stir that together, and then you crank out these pills. And you can see on the right-hand side that each of these represents a pill. Not all these have equal amounts of fentanyl in them. If you could click it 2 more times. So we have, one more, there you go. So you have the red pill and the blue pill there. So the blue pill has the lesser amount of fentanyl in it. That's the one that the cartels want to make. Cartels want to make the blue pill because it will get somebody high, it will get them addicted, and it'll get you coming back and buying more. And that's what they want. They want to make money off of you. But the red pill often gets made. In fact, from the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, they found in their testing it in their laboratories that 6 out of 10 of the pills that are counterfeit, that are made and sold on the streets, are potentially deadly. And so that's a high amount of drugs, these pills, that are potentially deadly for someone. Now it depends on someone's tolerance level. If they're a regular user, they may be able to handle that red pill. But others, teens, a lot of times cannot. You don't know which one you're getting if you're ever getting a pill from the internet. It's likely that at some point you'll run into that red pill. Next slide. So there's some trends out there that you need to watch out for. This is called rainbow fentanyl. Rainbow fentanyl is just a pill that's counterfeit that looks like candy, essentially. And so you might find this at a party. If you're hanging out, someone has these pills and tries to sell it to you, says you'll have a good time, it'll get you high. This is it's just a fun way to party. Watch out for that. This is fentanyl. It's being sold, trying to trick you to think that it's safe, almost like it's candy. Next slide. So social media is where this is being sold, particularly in Snapchat. Snapchat's popular because the message disappears. And so we have Amy in the front there, that's Alexander's mother. She's been out there protesting in front of Snapchat saying, you guys need to do something about your platform. You need to stop making it so easy for drug dealers to operate and sell to our kids. So just be aware, if you're looking for get any type of medication from the internet, you're not likely getting a legitimate pill. You're getting a fentanyl pill. In fact, 98% of the pills that we confiscate off the streets, our law enforcement teams go out and we're always trying to find it and remove it from the streets. 98% of the pills are fake pills, and they're fentanyl fake pills. Next slide. So just to keep yourself safe, assume all drugs can contain fentanyl. Continue to just click through there. Assume all pills obtained through the internet contain fentanyl. Never take a medication that is not yours. Never experiment with medication. Seek help from doctors and other specialists rather than turning to drugs or alcohol for relief. That's called self-medicating. Next slide. And so I want to talk about mental health real quick. Sometimes during the teen years, there's some changes in hormones and physical changes, and there's ups and downs in life, and there's sadness that can occur, and we have to be aware that those body changes can cause some issues with us mentally, and that it can seem like it's okay during that time of sadness to maybe turn to a substance to get some relief. And that may have been what Alexander was doing. I just want you to know that you are human, you are not broken, that those ups and downs are part of life, that we have to learn to be resilient and live and manage those ups and downs in life rather than turning to a substance for relief. So there's several ways. If you or a friend feels like giving up and maybe committing suicide, then there's things that you can do. Don't give up. Know that this is something that a lot of people have dealt with, that we have actually cures and fixes to that sadness. That's called depression. And so what you can do is tell a trusted friend, an adult. There's people here at the school who can help you and get you to the resources that you need to kind of change that spiral way of thinking and get that to turn and start to become more positive. You can go to your doctor, your family doctor. That's a confidential conversation with your doctor and talk to them about what's going on with you. You can go to 988, which is our suicide prevention hotline. You can text to it, or you can call them. You can call 911. Let's say you have a friend that's like, I can't live anymore, this is it, and they're actively, suicidal. Call 911. Call us. I've had that call many, many times over the years. I've been in law enforcement for 24 years now, and I've responded to that call. I've always been very compassionate and understanding. This is just a part of life. Sometimes we struggle and we need that help. So what I would do is make sure I would just let that person know, hey, you're safe. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. And I'm going to take you to the hospital, and I'm just going to have you see a doctor so that you can get the help you need and get you back on track. Sometimes it's a chemistry issue of the brain that just needs to be kind of looked into. We need to have those doctors and those specialists take a look and see, maybe there's something that's easily fixable here. You don't have to suffer, and you shouldn't have to suffer. Time to get some help if you're starting to feel like there's some sadness that's persisting for too long. And too long would be more than 2 weeks, I would say. Seek some help. We want to get you to a therapist. There's lots of people out there who are trained in dealing with this kind of stuff. And there's psychologists, psychiatrists, marriage and family therapists. They're all great people who can really help. Give them a chance to help you. One thing about human nature is that we like to help each other. We're social creatures. So don't be afraid to ask for help. We want to help each other. It's just how we're built. It's how we're programmed. Next slide. So if you are ever at a party and you see somebody go down, you go into the bathroom and you open the door and somebody's unconscious in the bathroom. That's a medical emergency. It's time to call 911. Next, we have to get Narcan sprayed into their nose. So Narcan is what's called an opioid antagonist. I carry it with me. It's becoming more prevalent in the community. All police officers carry this with us. It's something that we can spray in someone's nose, and what it does is it reverses the effects of an opioid overdose temporarily. We still have to get that person to the emergency room, but because police officers are often just kind of roaming communities, we can respond really quickly. We have faster cars in the fire department who bring their big lumbering fire trucks a lot of times, and it's just slower to get to the scene. If you discover somebody's down, who knows how long they've been down? So calling 911 right away and get us there and let us have a chance to spray this in their nose and get them breathing again. When I talked to an emergency room physician, they said that it's so important that pre-hospital care that we get the Narcan sprayed into their nose and on board so that they can start to recover, because the longer they're down, the harder it is for them to survive, for doctors to get them to survive. We also carry with us on our police cars is what's called ambu bags, which we can assist with breathing. Now just know that if someone is snorting this stuff or using this drug and it's all over their face and you were to do mouth to mouth, you could get exposed to fentanyl and you could be a secondary victim to it. So we want to be very careful about having to do something with someone, mouth to mouth on somebody we don't know, because it's potentially that you could expose yourself. And then we also can do CPR. All police officers are trained in CPR. Next slide. Would like you guys to know about the Good Samaritan law. The Good Samaritan law says that, say you're at that party and you find that person down, but you're concerned that everybody there is going to get in trouble. There's been drinking going on, maybe some marijuana smoking, some other drugs, and you're concerned that, hey, I don't want my friends to get busted. Don't worry about it. Call 911. The law says that if there's a medical emergency and police officers are called to the scene, that we are not going to charge anybody with a crime. Now, if that was my call, truth be told, what I would do is I would shut that party down. And if there's any drugs or booze or things that are sitting out in the open, I'm going to confiscate it so that we don't have any more victims, right? But that's reasonable, right? We don't want more people to get hurt. So that's the one thing that I'm gonna do, but I'm not gonna charge people with a crime, and we also get to save a life. There is one exception in there about someone could get arrested, and that is if they shut the door in my face when I arrive and they don't let me go in and rescue the person, then I will place that person under arrest, and then my partners, who will also be arriving at the same time, are going to go help the person who's down. So just know that you have to let us do our job if we're en route, for people to not, for this law to be in effect. Next slide. So handling fentanyl. Fentanyl is added to all street drugs right now. So if you come across it, if you have it in your hand, you're like, oh shoot, I just touched this. This could be fentanyl. Know that it can go through your skin. But our skin is still a pretty good barrier, so don't panic. You just don't want to be handling this stuff for very long. You want to, get rid of it as fast as possible. Don't touch it. Wear gloves, wear goggles. It can go in through your nose, it can go in through your eyes, it can seep in through your skin. Very, very dangerous stuff. You don't want to handle it. You want to turn it over to authorities if you can. I don't want you guys handling it any more than that. Really, it should just be turned over to us so that we can safely dispose of it. Next slide. I do want to talk to you about addiction real quick, because this is something that everybody should know about. There's a lot of addictive substances. The biggest problem that we have in society with addictive substance is alcohol, believe it or not. That is our biggest problem in society. It's because it's also legal for 21 years of age and older. Nicotine is another problem in our society. So how does this stuff happen? How does it become an addiction? Believe it or not, that young people or people who are adults who struggle with a lifelong addiction started when they were teenagers, 90% of them. So this is important for you because you're at the age right now where you may want to experiment. You may want to try some things that are risky and see what happens. And I want you to think twice about it, because addiction is something that lasts forever. Okay, you're going to struggle with it forever. And this is a little bit about how it works.
It's important to understand that everyone in the world has addictions, or rather natural addictions, to things that are good, like food, water, and sleep. These natural addictions are important for our health and survival, and without them, we would not hunger or crave the things we need to survive. Now, we aren't exactly born with these natural addictions. Our body creates them. Let's look at an example. When you bite into an apple, your brain says, "Yum." Your brain recognizes that this apple is good for you. It has nutrition, vitamins, and gives your body the energy it needs to survive. Whenever the brain recognizes something that's good, it releases a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine causes you to experience pleasure. It's what makes you feel good, like when biting into an apple. The brain releases this dopamine in order to teach the body that this is healthy and good for your survival, and that it should remember to do it again. Now, there are other things we do that can release the pleasurable dopamine, like playing video games, exercising, or reading a good book. However, the amount of dopamine released during these activities is less than what's released when we eat food. The brain does this so it can recognize which is more important. So if you go 2 days without reading a book, or 2 days without eating food, your body is going to crave the food over the book. As such, your brain creates what's called a hierarchy of survival, which ranks how important each of these things is to your survival. Now, there are some things that will not cause the release of dopamine, like eating soap or punching yourself in the face. The brain knows that these things are not good and therefore does not release the pleasurable dopamine because your brain does not want you to do it again. Now, let's look at alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, and other drugs. These are all classified carcinogens, proven to cause cancer and other fatal diseases. Now, your brain should recognize that these things are harmful to your body. However, these substances have special chemical characteristics that fool the brain into releasing dopamine, oftentimes in much greater amounts than the body has ever experienced before. Because of this, the body is fooled into thinking that these things are good and important, sometimes even more important than food, water, or sleep, and consequently hijacks the #1 spot in your survival hierarchy. So now, if you go 2 days without eating or 2 days without drinking alcohol, your body will actually crave the alcohol over the food. This is an extreme case of addiction, where the person addicted believes that they will die if they don't get it. The severity of the addiction depends on where the alcohol or drug lies within your hierarchy of survival, and can increase even with casual use. Research shows that people under the age of 21 are at the highest risk of having their survival hierarchy hijacked. Why? Because their brains are still growing and developing and are hypersensitive to false shocks of dopamine caused by these harmful substances. By 21, the brain is more fully developed and mature, and the survival hierarchy becomes more permanent and less susceptible to getting hijacked. The flip side is that once you are 21, it becomes very difficult to remove these harmful substances from your survival hierarchy. Studies show that 9 out of 10 people who currently struggle with addiction started drinking, smoking, or using before the age of 21. Understanding addiction as a preventable disease can help save millions of lives. The decision to wait until 21 could mean the difference between a life enslaved by addiction or a life full of success and accomplishment. Want to learn more? Visit us at wait21.org.
It's important to know a couple things from that video. One is that due to brain development, and your brain continues to develop until the mid-20s, you're more vulnerable to addiction simply because of brain development. That's nothing that you can control. Now, I found that, and I did this when I was a teenager, was that sometimes a teen might say, "Thanks, Sergeant Gonzalez, for giving us all this information. I'm sure that'll affect somebody, but I've got control over it. This is not a problem that I have to deal with." There tends to be a thing that teenagers do, and that is they overestimate their abilities. And when it comes to drugs, this is kind of something you don't want to do. You don't want to overestimate the chance and say, "I have control over this." You don't. This is chemistry. This is something that when it goes into the body, it just alters the brain without you having any control over it whatsoever. So just be aware of that because of your developing brain, and you don't have control over that, right? Till your mid-20s, you are more vulnerable. So waiting to 21 is really important before you start using any of these substances, because your brain is more developed and less likely to become hijacked or addicted. The other thing that's even better than that is wait till 25 when your brain is fully developed. Then you're really reducing the risk that you'll become addicted to anything. So I know we have legal substances out there such as alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana that you can use for the age of 21 years of age and older. But just beware, you really should be holding off until 21 or 25 preferably, because just to be safe, and you don't want to deal with a lifelong struggle with addiction. Next slide. So here's another study from the Centers for Disease and Prevention, Control and Prevention. What they said was that, in the study they did, was if you are under age of 15 and you start drinking alcohol, even if it's casual use, you are 6 times more likely to become an adult addicted to alcohol than if you had just waited till 21 years of age. It's just another study that came out just for you to be aware of. Be careful when you're out there. I know that teen years are kind of part of that, risk-taking behavior starts happening. Go to parties a lot, that kind of thing. Be careful. You could end up with a lifelong struggle with addiction. Next slide. So I want to talk about electronic cigarettes. I'm just the messenger here. I don't have an opinion about these things. Don't hate me for it, but I'm going to tell you some truths about this stuff. It's not safe for you. Let's take a look at what's in these vape pens. So when they were first made and they were sold out into the community, they were being sold as harmless water vapor. And so when we see, what is harmless water vapor? Harmless water vapor would be like steam on a mirror after you take a shower, or the steam that comes off of a pot. Next slide. And that's harmless water vapor. Now, I want to bring in another concept, which is aerosol. And aerosol is like spray paint. It's basically a liquid inside of a can that's under compressed air, and then that then gets sprayed onto something. The tiny particles then attach itself to the surface of whatever it is that you're spraying it on, right? That's spray paint or hairspray. When the scientists looked at the cloud that comes out of these electronic cigarettes, what do you think they classified it as? That's right, they classified it as an aerosol. So what does that mean to you? It means that when you breathe this stuff in, it goes into the lungs and it sticks to the inside like spray paint. Now, some of it obviously comes out when you breathe out, but some of it is sticking in there. It's not harmless water vapor. It actually sticks to the inside. So you think, well, how harmful can it be? Even if it sticks to the inside, well, now your body has to deal with it. The immune system in particular comes in, has to remove it, kind of break it down and remove it from the lungs. Let's see how harmful this could be. It's the next slide. So the chemicals that are in yellow are harmful or potentially harmful chemicals for humans. And that's what's been found in the aerosol that comes out of these electronic cigarettes. So just beware, there are things like benzene. Benzene is known to cause leukemia, a type of cancer that can kill you. And there's lead. Lead is something that builds up in the kidneys and can cause kidneys to shut down or not function properly. There's many, many other chemicals in there. Arsenic is one of them. So just beware, this stuff is going into those lungs, it's sticking, and it certainly is toxic. Next slide. So some of you may not be aware of how much you actually take in if you're smoking, if you're using one of these vaping devices and you end up breathing in, how much nicotine are you really getting? So here's a study that was done by Stanford University that looked at it and said, well, if a pack of cigarettes has 20 cigarettes in it, which is about 20 milligrams of nicotine, so each cigarette's about 1 milligram of nicotine in it. We know cigarettes are highly addictive. So if we look at the next one, which is, if you could advance it. One. Okay, so that's 20 cigarettes. Advance it one more. So here we have, I believe this is a Juul pod. Juul pod has 41 cigarettes worth of nicotine. The next one there, which is hard for me to read from my distance here, it is 75 cigarettes worth of nicotine. And then the Soren, which is the last one, is 90 cigarettes worth of nicotine. So if someone is just kind of puffing away, even sometimes I've heard, puffing away in a class, blowing in their sleeve, something like that, you don't know how much nicotine you're taking in quite a bit. So if that's happening all day long, nicotine is highly addictive, and it's also a poison in the body. It causes circulatory problems, heart problems as well. Next slide. So we have found that fentanyl has been found in vape pens, that the DEA released this notification a couple of years ago now that said fentanyl is, it was found on the East Coast. It was more recently, just a month ago, found on the East Coast. And so when I was researching this, whether or not, is it on the West Coast? Because most of these trends will start on the East Coast and kind of make their way to the West. We actually found, the next slide, that the, sorry, I'm trying to look between the different screens here, that we actually had it here first in this case, that the DEA put out a notice a couple of years ago that said that we have found it here in one of our vape pens. Next slide. So marijuana, just be aware, concentrated marijuana is becoming more and more popular. Concentrated marijuana has a high concentration of THC, the tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the psychoactive drug in the marijuana products. Marijuana that I grew up with was mostly the leafy type, that you put in a pipe and you smoke it. That stuff had about 12% THC, which is even higher than, say, my grandparents, who had about 3% THC in their marijuana they would have smoked back in the day. But today's is 90 plus. That is extremely harmful to the brain, especially the young developing brain. So be aware, this stuff is not safe to use. It can cause a lot of problems. Next slide. And some of those problems are throat irritation, it's something that's called hyperemesis, which is where cannabinoid hyperemesis, which is where you have uncontrolled cyclic vomiting. It can cause memory and concentration problems, and it can cause the brain to not work right. There's brain scans that they've done on marijuana users, and they found that their brain is just not functioning properly. So it is not something that you want to use on a regular basis to either self-medicate or just to get high, because it's going to start causing problems. It's going to not make it so you don't do well in school, or even be able to do well in a job necessarily if you have to use your mind for your job. Next slide. So it can also cause temporary paranoia. We found that sometimes it can cause some physical reactions to where people think that they're going to die and they end up in the emergency room, and they have to be under medical care until it wears off. It can cause schizophrenia is one of the disorders that someone could have, a mental health disorder, that if you're predisposed genetically, and who knows who is, for schizophrenia. I mean, I might be, and if I start using marijuana, I could end up with schizophrenia, which is a very debilitating disorder, and you certainly don't want to kind of flip that switch on. It can cause depression. It can cause mental health problems to get worse rather than get better. So just be aware that this marijuana is not necessarily, it's not safe. It's not safe like it's being toted out in the community. Sometimes it says, yeah, let's legalize it. You know what? You know who legalized it? Voters. It wasn't the medical professionals. It wasn't actually our government that legalized it. It was the people who put it to a vote, and the 20% that showed up to the polls that day, a little more than half of those, so a little more than 10% actually voted for the marijuana laws. So that's how marijuana became legal. It doesn't mean that it's safe, and you just need to be aware of that. Next slide. And just know that it is addicting, that there's some kind of misunderstanding out there that people say, oh, it's not addicting. It is addicting. You can look at studies, look at legitimate studies, like this one here by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. They have found that it is addicting. And teens are 4 to 7 times more likely to develop a marijuana use disorder than an adult. So again, just waiting till the age of 21, or better yet 25 years of age, is just the big message here. Hold off before you use that stuff, because you're just better off. Next slide. So Alexander, he may have had an anxiety disorder, according to his mom. He may have just surrounded himself with friends who liked to smoke marijuana and brought in some other drugs. He may have just liked getting high. Who knows what the reasons are? The problem is that he's living in a time of fentanyl. And in a time of fentanyl, we have this extremely deadly drug that's being flooded onto our streets. And you have to be aware of it, that it's added into all street drugs. It's just not safe to use anything. It never has been, but it's especially more dangerous today. So Alexander, he gambled. He may not have known the risks that he was up against. And now we are using him as an example. His mom is allowing us to tell his story to hopefully save lives. We want to make sure that you are aware of the dangers of fentanyl and addiction so that you can sidestep those problems, right? Make good choices with the knowledge that you're given. And I hope that you guys can stay safe out there. Take care of each other. Don't self-medicate. Look to the specialists, the experts who are out there who know how to treat these problems if you are experiencing any type of mental illness. Just here to give you that information. Good luck to you guys. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.